Welcome to the podcast.
Fellas. Is that what we meant? The digression session.
The digression session featuring the fellas.
Yeah. Welcome to our digression session featuring the young fellas.
That is it.
Will we introduce the young fellas?
Go for
I'm
yeah.
Rebecca.
I'm Derry, yeah, that's me.
Ginte, I'm Ginte.
And I'm Kate. I was about to go and describe what I study, but then I study music.
It feels like at the start, you know, at like the tweenies or something when you're younger, when you're watching, and it's like I'm da 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 and I'm da da da. It's kind of what it feels like.
Incredible,
yeah.
But we are not going to be talking about the tweenies. Well, actually,
no.
Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the tweenies later. Who knows? Are the tweenies on unfollows? Well, we're going to talk about our topics and also unfollows. And is there on unfollows?
So what do you guys think the unfollows is? Would anyone like to explain what it is? Well, Rebecca has a great video on her wiki, so I think she should.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the like traditional omphalos being based upon like the ancient Greek stone that marks the center of the world in Delphi is a really nice way to like start it off, because then in the 19th century when they took the word omphalos and they kind of made it a bit more of an abstracted definition as just like a center of activity. And that's where that's where we were inspired in Higgs' book, where he said that like the 20th century was a time when the omphalos was being deleted, and then deleting an omphalos leaves you with this chaotic noise of multiple perspectives. And that's where he, like, I guess, I think that's really, really interesting, because he's kind of putting it out there that like there's nothing to reference. But then in our history project, I feel like a lot of us chose, well, in mine anyway, I'm not sure, I chose, like, I was thinking of like ballet as an omphalos in the 20th century. So therefore maybe the omphalos isn't disappearing, it's multiplying. I think that's my perspective of it. So rather than having one central omphalos in 20th century, it's like multiple different ones. But I don't know how far we can push the definition. Like, yeah.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that it's being deleted. I think that there's just like loads of them appeared and like, like little niches and stuff. So
into little niches.
Yeah.
Where were we? Everybody's interpretation of unfollows.
Yeah.
Jumping in the deep end.
Rebecca, your video, did you give an explanation for your video?
Did I give an
Okay, so what do you think the omphalos is?
Well, like I was saying, I don't think there is a single omphalos in the 20th century. So I mean, I would be very happy if somebody wanted to argue with me about this, because like the 20th century, especially modernism, seems to be about like a collage of ideas and concepts. And so like all these composers and artists and intellectuals were they were meeting in cultural centers, which could be like cultural omphalwa, or like the what I was focusing on was ballet. So I was trying to interpret ballet as an omphalos. But then I started to think in the PowerPoint about how people could also be omphalos. So perhaps Diaghilev, the famous impresario who brought all these artists together to create the Saison Russe for Les Ballets Russes, his company. He brought like the composers and artists together and encouraged this meeting of minds. So perhaps like he was an omphalos himself. I don't know, I'm just throwing these ideas out there. What do you think, like about, like, is it a person or is it a place?
I find it kind of like, maybe I got too like wrapped up in what I was thinking, but when I was thinking about existentialism being an omphalos in like mid to late 1940s Paris, because it was this movement that, like, a cultural movement that like all the intellectualism and everything happening in Paris at that time kind of revolved around. But like the very concept of umphalos is that, you know, it's like a central theme or like meaning. Would you say that like that makes sense? Like a central meaning, or does that not really? Because that was where I was kind of tripping myself up.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that works too, like an ism, like an umphalos could be one of the isms of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's it. But then I was like, well, like existentialism, like the meaning of existentialism is that there is no meaning, you know? Like existence precedes essence. So I was like, um, yeah.
No, yeah, I agree though. I think that it could be a place, like we keep mentioning Paris, and we probably will mention Paris a lot throughout the rest of the recording, but like cultural centers and hubs like Paris are like umphaluses, but also what do we call them? But also I think all the isms are umphaluses as well. Like in the 19th century, it was all like linear and everything. And then after the war, it just exploded into different perspectives, I guess. So yeah.
What if war is
Sorry?
umphalos as opposed to being a destroyer of umphalos? It is just, I don't know if that
It
makes
could be, yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely, or even like fascism. I'm really focusing on the isms here, but like fascism and communism, like these are movements that inspired war, or that were very passionate about war and like encouraged the ideas that brought about war. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Hot
Any
take.
of the isms.
I just think an umphalos is just a place. I just
Oh.
think I wouldn't go in personally. I just, yeah, I think
What
like
place?
I think at the start of the 20th century, like start to mid, I would say like the four main ones would be like Vienna, Paris, New York, and then like Los Angeles as it goes on. Especially Vienna and Paris, because like it's like there's so much going on there. Um and I think a lot of the isms and the movements and those things kind of spawn from people, but a lot of those people were in those places and, you know, sharing those ideas. And like Kate, like you touched on like the cafe cultures and like these sharing of ideas, but they were all in like these places. And so I think, yeah, my opinion is that those
But do you
umphaluses are
not
actually,
think that, sorry, do you not think that like even in Paris, there's so much stuff going on. And like there's like so many isms going on in Paris that Paris is just like a center full of umphaluses, but it's not an actual umphalus. If that, I don't know if I'm making sense.
yeah, but then the
Maybe
problem,
Paris is, sorry, go on.
no, but then the
Getting
problem is
heated.
like how deep do you go down? It's like, is an umphalos, you know, like a country? Is it a city? Is it a person in a city? Is it an
No,
idea by a
it's
person? It's like
ideas.
how,
a
but
tico.
like
It's all
that's
Yeah,
like how
ideas.
deep down are you gonna mine
yeah.
down to like consider what's the hub?
How far can you push the definition? Because
Yeah,
then it becomes entirely arbitrary. I
exactly.
think that's like Einstein's relativity, because once you stop like giving it a point of reference, once you stop giving
Yeah.
anything a frame of reference, or once you like choose your own frame of reference, then how do you refer to anything else around it? You know, I
Yeah.
think that's what the ambiguity is, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's one
Yeah.
of the big arguments in the 20th century too, is like this lack of frame of reference. Is like we're arguing about certain frames of reference, but then there's also the argument of, is there even a frame of reference anymore? You know,
Yeah.
because it's all entirely subjective.
Mm.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah, I was there. Do you guys think that for the 21st century, is there an umphalus? Is there like a center right now? What do you think?
I mean, if we think there is, like Dave was saying, if we think there is no center of reference in the 20th century, then definitely not. There wouldn't be in the 21st. I feel like you couldn't make one out of nothing. But then if there is a lot in the 20th century, I don't know how they'd all encompass into one thing. Or somebody else was saying, I had another idea, I can't remember.
Oh, I was saying earlier that the internet could be seen as an umphalus, like because it's like a linear. I don't know how to explain it. the internet has loads of ideas in it, but we're all like following those ideas.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
umphalos.
Being
Does anybody
controlled.
know the definition of an umphalos?
It's a navel. That's the very
Yeah.
that's the like ancient Greek definition.
It
or
says here, the dictionary definition is the center
Mhm.
or hub of something. So I would
Mhm.
definitely agree with Ginte that if you were to argue that there is an umphalos in the 21st century, would be the internet, because it seems that nearly everything, it spawns out of the internet, and so that's like the hub where everything comes out of.
Yeah, but then it's also how deep can we go? Because even in the internet,
Okay.
there's so many niches. There's so
Yeah,
many
there is,
things
because is
that you
it
can go
like
into.
I think that's
Yeah.
what makes it an unfollows then, because
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
crazy.
Yeah, it's like, is an umphalos like a place where ideas spawn, or is it like the center idea that that everything else
activity.
spawns out of, if that makes
Around, yeah.
sense?
Yeah, we could compare the internet to being like a country like Paris or like France or something.
Yeah.
So there's loads of ideas that spawn out of like Paris
Yeah.
and stuff, in the same way loads of ideas spawn out of the internet. So
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's like
the umphalos.
I'm trying to think of like a metaphor, like, or analogy. Like it's like a plant. It's like, I might be going way off topic here, but like it's like, is the umphalos like the seed in the plant that like everything grows out of, or is the umphalos like the pot that like is holding all these ideas
Yeah.
together? You know?
Or
I
the
think
entire plant.
I think we should
yeah,
definitely.
I think the
yeah.
seed. I think definitely it's like the axis that everything's rotating around, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
That's the beauty of the umphalos. It could be
Wow.
anything.
This is so abstract.
Well, that ties into existentialism very well, that it can be
Yeah.
anything, because like that's the whole thing of existentialism, is that existence precedes essence. So life is meaningless, but you decide what the meaning for you personally is. That's I don't know. It's like, that's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
But,
And how does that tie? Where does that come in the 20th century? Like.
existentialism?
Mhm.
Well, its kind of heyday was Paris after the war. It was actually like, I was thinking about this last night, because when I first started researching this, I was focusing a lot on the like philosophers like Sartre, de Beauvoir, and Camus, who were nearly like celebrities. Like they were very like charismatic, and had a lot of friends and stuff. Because like in Paris at that time, it wasn't just philosophy that was happening. There was like, it was a cultural hub for music and art and literature. And even like Camus wasn't just a philosopher, he was a writer, and the others too. But then I was kind of like thinking of this period of time as like, I don't know, like a pop culture moment, or like youth subculture or something. I don't know, because I was reading about how loads of young people kind of, there was this huge influx into Paris, because the whole thing, existentialism, nothing matters, give it your own meaning. It was kind of this like live hard, love freely kind of thing going on, which was of course a huge draw for young people. And hostels were very cheap in the left bank in Paris. But yeah, and so like a kind of like post-war pop culture movement, which was a really strange way to consider this like really serious philosophical concept. But I don't know, like, does that tie into anyone else's? No, not really.
Yeah, well, I was doing a bit on existentialism, a little bit in my kind of psychology, psychoanalysis thing, which is probably the furthest away from music that anyone's getting. But I found it interesting nonetheless. But I was reading a book about a guy called Viktor Frankl, who was he's quite a famous psychiatrist, who also kind of came up with his answer to what he believes his answer to existentialism is. So like, Kay, you were saying how like existentialism is like what's kind of the meaning of life, or like life kind of has no meaning, or maybe you can correct me if I'm butchering it. But he developed this thing called logotherapy, which was like the meaning the purpose of life is trying to find a meaning in life. So like the goal in life is to just search for a meaning. It's pretty
Like your own
abstract.
meaning, or
Yeah, exactly, and it's completely different for everyone else. Yeah, and so that's kind of so he kind of discovered he was a psychiatrist in Vienna. That's where I think this whole hub Valas thing is. And he got put into a Nazi concentration camp, and he kind of spent a lot of his time there observing everyone else, and like trying to figure out like kind of what their everyone was trying to figure out like what their meaning was in life, because like as a Jew stuck in a concentration camp, there's only so much meaning you can get, unfortunately. And so he kind of used all that to create this thing called logotherapy, which is like the meaning of life is to just search for meaning. So then, and with psychoanalysis, then I was going to back to Vienna and to like Jung and Freud, who were like big psychoanalysts at the time. Well, like Freud, like as the founder of it and all, and so they were buds at some point, and then they stopped being buds. Freud was pretty argumentative, and he was kind of insecure about his ideas. Like Jung had his Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. They're their names, by the way. The full names, just in case. Jung or Freud felt threatened by Jung's ideas, so they like stopped being friends.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was big fight.
So he was like insecure that his ideas were wrong, or that Jung's were better.
Well, it's not that he was insecure. Like he like you wouldn't openly admit that he was insecure, but he felt so strongly about his ideas, maybe, so that like when Jung kind of started poking holes in them,
because some of them are questionable.
Yeah, well, like that. So yeah, like some of his like biggest ideas are like that people's main drives, whether they're aware of it or not, is like aggression and sex. So like they're all just trying to like work up the food chain to like get the best partner, or like motivated by like anger and aggression. And Jung was like, nah man, that's just wrong. But Freud still was like really influential, and he did like like he founded psychoanalysis and like popularized the unconscious, and like which spawned like other isms and movements. Like surrealism was really influenced by him, and like his book Analysis of Dreams, I think it's called. And so yeah, does anybody have anything on surrealism, perhaps?
Not surrealism, but I was just thinking it's crazy how everything is still like so tied together, like how surrealism could be tied to Dadaism as well, because they like share the main idea of like the unconscious mind. It's probably due to the fact that like surrealism basically developed out of Dadaism, and many artists who like participated in Dadaist movements then went on to engage with surrealist work and stuff. So yeah, basically surrealism and Dadaism, they like really criticize the Western emphasis on logic, and Dadaism like really condemned like logic and progress, and believed that the world was so like almost obsessed with progress, and
that it was like destructive nearly, that it was
like basically so basically the Dada movement developed in Zurich after World War I, and many artists moved to Zurich because it was like a neutral country in the war, and
Stravinsky too.
Yeah, you could say that Zurich was a kind of Omphalos. So yeah, the movement was established in the Cabaret Voltaire, which was like an artsy nightclub, and they began discussing the war and how it all began and how much pain the war caused. And they began to realize that basically, because they lived in a world where logic and reason could lead to so much like pain and damage, and it could literally cause a war, then maybe they should avoid logic, and maybe they should stick to like nonsense and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of art came from. Basically, artists wanted to like show how ridiculous the world was through their art, and their art like had no logic behind it. So I guess I could show you some art if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sounds
Go
good.
for it.
Okay, cool. Wait, hold on. I need to find it.
What time period was that? Oh,
Oh, like 1920s-ish. Do you see this? Yeah, is that
Mhm.
okay? Cool. Do you still see it? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So the first one here, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, is a piece by Marcel Duchamp called "The Fountain," and it's very iconic and stuff. But I still wanted to include it because it's very important, because it made us question what art actually is. So it's a great example of what he called a ready-made, where he took an ordinary object and just claimed it to be a work of art, basically. And it was very controversial at the time, because he submitted it to be in a society of independent artists, but they rejected him and he started protesting. It was like a very big deal. But yeah, it raised a lot of questions, like what actually is art, who gets to decide what it is, and yeah, that's basically it. The next piece is one of my favorite pieces ever. I love it so much. It's a piece by an artist called Hannah Hawk, who established like photo montage and collage as a work of art. And it has an extremely long title called "Cut with the Kitchen Knife, Data Through the Last Weimar Beer Belly Cultural Epoch of Germany." It's like a tongue twister. And yeah, I could talk about this for hours because there's so much to talk about. I kind of see it as like a reflection of political chaos, and it's her way of commenting on like the Weimar Republic. And yeah, I think she cut figures from like magazines and newspapers, so everything in it is like very topical and like politically driven and everything.
Inte, I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
For the first one, the urinal.
Yeah.
Maybe I only heard a bit about this, so maybe you're the expert to ask. I read that there was like controversy about like whether, is it Duchamp? How do you pronounce his last name? I don't want to
Duchamp. Yeah.
Duchamp. Whether he was the one that actually came up with that idea.
Yeah, I was reading the
I
same
read
thing.
the same.
I don't actually think that it was him who created it. I think he maybe thinks it, but I actually can't remember her name. But I think someone else, a woman, created it or had the idea for it. Yeah, because she was doing like these ready-mades before Marcel Duchamp ever was, and I think he just stole the idea basically from a woman, which is gross.
But you said you don't know if he knows he did it.
Yeah, I feel like he thinks he did it. Like he subconsciously maybe thinks
That's
that like,
crazy.
oh, he created it, but I don't know. I'm not too sure. Did you find it? I'll try Googling it. Anyways, yeah, feminism was like a very big thing at the time, and I could kind of relate it to this piece by Hannah Hawk, because there's like a lot of feminist stuff included in it. So even if you think of the title, "Cut with a Kitchen Knife," she's already like bringing up femininity and stuff and what it means to be a woman, and even like how she was treated as a Dadaist woman, because I don't think Dada women were treated that well either, like the other artist who I actually can't think of her name, but I think that Marcel Duchamp stole her idea for the fountain, like you were saying. So yeah. And yeah, even if you look at the corner of the map or of the picture, there's a like a little map showing what countries women are allowed to vote in. So yeah, very topical.
Sorry, I was just like looking at that for ages. It's so
Yeah.
cute.
There's so much going on.
Yeah, there's there's just a lot. Okay, I'll move on, I guess. The next is a piece by Jean Arp. So this kind of embodies Dadaist ideas of rejecting rationality. So Arp made this work by tearing up pieces of paper and just letting them fall to the floor, and then he just stuck them on like wherever they landed. And so basically what he's trying to say is that reason is senseless. Like the Dadaist hated reason, and because reason led to so much destruction, and he wanted to forget about logic and everything. So, and he embraced chance and randomness in this. So yeah.
Yeah, I found the girl. Sorry. Her
Me
name
too.
is Baroness
Sorry.
I
Elsa
found it
von
too.
Freytag
Freytag.
Laringhoven. I have no idea how to pronounce that. I am so sorry.
I think she's in the Higgs book, isn't?
He is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's where I found it.
But
Yeah.
apparently, yeah, he stole the idea of her.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, because Dadaist women and all women weren't treated well at the time. So
It's crazy.
And wasn't she very radical as well? The fact that a lot of people didn't really recognize her as an artist because she was more of a performance artist almost.
Yeah. And that comes to question what even is art? Like, what is art at the time? Can performances be art, or does it have to be like realist paintings and pictures and stuff like that? So yeah. I think I have one more. Oh no, a couple more paintings. So this is another one by Marcel Duchamp. It's called LHOOQ, or the Mona Lisa with a mustache. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Oh, never mind. Yeah, so this piece also rejected tradition, and it is another one of his like ready-mades. And he titled the piece LHOOQ, and when it's read in French, it sounds like Ella Chodakul, which roughly translates to like she has a hot ass or something like that. Excuse my French, literally. But yeah, it's basically just rejecting traditional values. So yeah. And the last piece that I have here is one called "Object to be Destroyed" by Man Ray, and this is a great piece. So it actually was called, so it was called "Object to be Destroyed," and it came with instructions on how to be destroyed. And a group of protesters took it like literally when it was like in a museum and actually destroyed it, which led to Man Ray producing multiple recreations of the piece, and he renamed the piece to Indestructible Object. So this is actually quite an important thing that he did, because it took away the permanence of the art, and it's like a way of rejecting traditional art, because you would never see an artist like Michelangelo like recreating his art or like renaming the Sistine Chapel or something. So Man Ray added like uncertainty to art, and he was basically saying, hey, look, I can make multiple pieces of this, I can rename it, I can do whatever I want, like this is what art is.
But do you guys think that if some art is destroyed and it's recreated, is it the same piece of art? Like it's like you're saying he got destroyed and then he made another one, and like
so he made like loads of them. He made like thousands, and even if you buy one today, I'm pretty sure you don't know if it's made by him or if it's made by someone else. So I think it still is art.
No, I'm not saying it's not art, but it's not the same piece of art. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like he's putting it in the same category, at like the same idea, but it's completely different. Like
I think it moves art into like a different form of presentation, because it's then like on par with things like performances, or like theatrical performance, where that's reproduced. Like the same performance isn't on every night, but you're still performing that specific spectacle. Like, I feel like it's moving it away from like their like real distinction between them.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's like trying to say. Like, what is art? What do you guys think art is? And he's just questioning that. And his main thing is just rejecting everything in the past. Like, he thinks the past caused so much hurt, and he just wants to reject all of it. So yeah, that's basically my presentation there.
It was really interesting.
Yeah.
How do you stop share?
Um,
So yeah, and that's basically Dada in a nutshell.
Nice.
and you know the way you were saying Dada was really connected to surrealism.
Yeah.
And does surrealism come after Dadaism in that sense, or?
Yeah.
Parallel?
So Dada started thinking of these ideas of like randomness and chance, and at the end of like the Dadaist movement, they started thinking like about. They started just basically getting like surrealist ideas, and it just developed into it. Yeah.
Spicy.
Yeah.
Was that all in Zurich then?
No, so it moved from Zurich then to Paris and to, I think it moved actually from Zurich to Berlin and then to Paris and New York. So yeah, there's a lot of umphaluses there.
Didn't you say that Dadaism was like a product of, or a byproduct of like the war? Like,
Yeah. So basically it started because of the war, because the war caused so much hate in the world.
and was it the First or the Second World War, or both?
Oh, sorry, the first.
Yeah.
The first.
That's really interesting as well that you're saying they're so focused on like not ignoring the past, but just not embracing the past. Whereas before the war, I feel like a lot of art and a lot of art presentation was focused on like embracing the past, or like using I think folklore took like even in like Bartok and well, although Stravinsky doesn't like to admit it, Stravinsky as well, their works were like rooted in like the Russian, in their Russianness, I don't know how and the fact that in Paris in particular, they were really interested in like embracing like Orientalism and exoticism. And I think that's why the Rite of Spring, although it caused like a huge riot, and we don't know the extent to how much that was like contrived, but the primitive roots of that, how it was based on like a primitive past, and everybody was looking to this exotic past. So not necessarily like the 19th century where it was quite linear and like they had a way of doing things and they had a single perspective. The Rite of Spring was very shocking, but it looked to historical roots, and I don't think Dadaism does that at all. It like completely
I guess people thought that like the way we were living isn't good because it started a war, and everyone wanted to change something, but I guess everyone just had different ways of changing them. So for example, Dadaism just like rejected everything completely and wanted to like focus on nonsense and stuff like that, whereas other artists still looked back, like you were saying, and like still had elements from the past, but they still changed it. So yeah.
It's kind of interesting that Dada was a big like kind of post-war cultural movement, cultural explosion, whatever you want to describe it as, because that was like the same as existentialism. It was a post-war thing as well. Wars and unfolds. I don't know.
I think what's really interesting about Dadaism is like Rebecca, as you said, like with the Russian composers, like they focused a lot on like past to like they looked at the past to push things on.
Yeah.
And like there's that quote, like I think about this a lot just in general. I think it's by Newton, but I don't know. And it's like, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And so he's basically saying that like you can only push something further by looking into the past. And it's like Dadaism kind of rejects that philosophy, is into like, don't bother looking at the past, only look
Yeah.
at the future, because well, for that is like the past was war, and that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
I
See,
just think they're
even
really
I think,
interesting.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really interesting as well, because I know I'm going to keep talking about Stravinsky, I apologize, but like was very adamant that he was, especially once he like wrote the Firebird and Petrushka, which were quite nationalist like music, but once he got past like his Russian stage, he went into his neoclassical stage. He was really adamant that he wasn't embracing his like childhood influence of being in Russia, and because he had moved from Russia since he was like from his like 20s, so he was saying that he was inspired by like today, and he was inspired by the present. And he said, what's the quote? I live neither in the past nor the future. I'm in the present. I cannot know what tomorrow will bring forth, and I only know what the truth is for me today. So to Stravinsky, his like umphalos, or center of reference, seems to be like it's today. But then Teraskin, like a historian, comes along and shows, very recently he's shown that there's an inherent Russian folk style that's assimilated in all of Stravinsky's work, is like serialist writing, that there's like a Stravinsky style that is like undeniable. And Bartok said this at the time as well, but he wasn't really listened to. So then it's kind of strange to think that like Stravinsky was kind of thinking in terms of Dadaism before it even existed, but it didn't really work because people that it like he was still tied to roots unconsciously, maybe Freudian, in a Freudian way. But
Wow.
like, yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Maybe he
But do you
didn't
think?
even realize.
Sorry, no, go on.
No, go ahead.
No. I've done lots of talking. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say maybe he didn't even realize that
Yeah.
he was so tied to the past. Like he didn't even think that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I was gonna like ask, do you think he realized? Do you think like part of him deep down knew what he was doing, or do you think it was all like unconscious behavior and like he just didn't know?
I think he was trying to reject it, but possibly couldn't. Like he was trying to move away from it, but like the stuff his style was inherently like,
Yeah. Because if
Russian.
you were going to move away from it, you would completely reject everything about the style, but he obviously had ties. So
Like, can any idea be completely new? Like, are there any records of like Dada, like influences of past movements or anything like that on Dada, or not really? Or
well, yeah, like futurism. I don't know if you know it, but futurism is like has influenced Dadaism and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, because it's the same for existentialism. I guess it's kind of like how do you describe it? Like a reconciliation of nihilism, which is a philosophical theory it's very much like nothing matters and like, but it's kind of rooted in skepticism, like how can we know that anything is true or real, as opposed to existentialism, which is like, well, if nothing's real, then we find our own meaning. And so like nihilism and like French traditional like political thought or ethical thought, I guess. Like, I don't know if I've been studying these in the French module recently, so they're like fresh in my mind, but they're these like French civil rights documents, like the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, and of the Napoleonic Code and stuff like this. So like France has always been very much like,
patriotic, yeah.
it's like, so it's kind of funny, like existentialism is kind of like nothing matters and everyone matters, and like, I don't know, but yeah, it's like all of these like old ideas that make a new thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Much to think about.
I always find that existentialism is one of those things that I don't know if I'll ever understand. It's just, I find it so confusing. It's so tough to get your head around.
because a lot of it seems like contradictory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And also it's very pretentious. Like I don't think you can get past that. It's quite a
Yeah.
pretentious thing. Even
Yeah.
like
A lot
I
of
don't
art
know.
is pretend. I know it's not art, but like a lot
Yeah,
of art is pretentious, you know.
that's true. Yeah. It was like I was reading this article. Someone wrote a book and it's called like at the Existentialist Cafe. I wish I could remember the name of the author. But I read a bit of that book and it's like just describing like that cultural movement in Paris, like everyone like wore black and like, you know, did all of these certain things. And it was just like a 1940s hipster is what I was thinking. That's not like a thing. Yeah.
Spicy.
Yes. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Or I'm trying to think. Do you have any revised opinions on what the Omphalos or
I was going to ask you, Kate, what do you think cafe culture had to do with this? Like like is there an Omphalos there in cafe culture or existentialism, or you know?
Yeah, well, it was definitely. Oh, oops. Yeah, there were these two places. There was a nightclub called Le Tabou, and oops, sorry, I'm getting a message. Le Tabou and a cafe called Café de Flore or something. These two places where a lot of big names kind of like met up and talked things over. So I guess like I'm going to close this right now. Sorry.
It's so popular.
It's so unprofessional of me. Yeah. Yeah. Cafe culture.
Yeah, cafe culture can actually kind of be seen in Dadaism as well, because Dadaism basically started in, it wasn't a cafe, but it was like a nightclub called the Cabaret Voltaire. And that's where they started talking about how much they hate the war and how they want to change and everything. So there could be links there.
Yeah. Like Jerry was saying, maybe it is a physical place, an Omphalos.
Yeah, maybe.
But with cafe culture, Kate, was it like, what kind of people were mixing?
Well, Paris in the like after the war in the 1940s was kind of just like artists, authors of like every caliber. I don't know if you know like Ernest Hemingway, James Joyce. Who else?
Has anyone
Gertrude
seen Midnight in Paris?
Yeah.
No, but I keep meaning to. I really want to.
It's literally like that. It's like his own
Oh,
Wilson.
these are all of the people.
He
who
goes
were
through
there.
Paris at nighttime, and it's like the
Yeah.
1920s, and he meets like Hemingway, and I think F. Scott Fitzgerald was there at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Picasso and all these like
What's
big
his name?
names who
The
were in
singer,
Paris.
Yeah.
the American singer. What's his name?
Oh,
my
God.
Piano player.
I'll look it up. Okay.
There were a lot of like jazz,
Yeah.
like singers and musicians there as well.
Speaking of
It's
jazz
so-
and France,
I read this book recently.
on.
Oh, sorry.
No, okay, go for it.
I read this book by Hemingway called A Movable Feast, which is like Paris being a movable feast. And he just like name drops people the entire book. It's like about his time that he spent in Paris, and like loads of writers and artists lived there because it was just so cheap. And they'd go on holiday in different parts of France, and kind of he went to like these like clinics, I guess, with Gertrude Stein, I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess it was just like this environment that really fostered creativity and collaboration.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's what cafe culture sort of is.
It's so weird to think about now though, because we look up to all these people, like we are so influenced by them, but like they were just like walking around amongst each other in Paris, just like sharing ideas. Like you can't even like comprehend it.
Yeah. Especially now. You can't walk around at all.
Yeah.
Just the concept of walking around in a cafe, just
going to a cafe.
Well, maybe there'll be a post-pandemic cultural explosion.
Yeah, cafe culture.
Oh, there definitely will. Definitely will.
I think what you were saying, Kate, about Paris really nurturing creative thought is absolutely true. But even before the war, because um but even well, I guess just the start of the 20th century in general, because if you compared Paris to like Russia, and although Russia had so much, the Imperial Russia had so much like money to put into arts and art presentation, like it was well, I guess it was censored. All art was censored and like remained quite linear, and I think remained quite stuck in the 19th century. And then art in Paris, when artists from Russia came over, they like were able to, like in particular, I guess I feel like ballet in general, with Diaghilev, he brought over talents from Russia and just enabled them to flourish, and their talents to nurture, and for them to meet and just create a Russian ballet that isn't restricted by the boundaries of like censored Russia, and that's just allowed to like pursue an avant-garde like road, I guess. Paris, which wouldn't definitely not have existed if Paris wasn't such a like a cultural hub.
Yeah, that makes me think like maybe deleting the omphalos or like splitting the omphalos was just like a way of freeing ourselves, like if that makes sense, from like this omphalos.
Yeah, like liberating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it's really interesting how like you're talking about Paris and all these like huge figures like converging into Paris, but like the idea that like creativity fosters more creativity. It's like because like there was these amazing Russian composers who had these amazing ideas, but it wasn't until they like went to Paris and were like, as you said, like liberated and were exposed to like how drastic your ideas could be, and then they went and did their own. I think that's super interesting. It really opens up your mind to like new ideas. But yeah, like for example Ravel, he, you know, the all-time favorite, like one of the best French composers, and like I think like because of like this like open-mindedness that was in Paris, this like acceptance of new ideas, and so like when he went to America, like he was exposed to jazz, and I think because he was in that mindset, he started, you know, really loving jazz, and so like he was really influenced by like he went on tour in America, I think it was in 28 or 26, and like nearly every night when he wasn't performing, he would just go to jazz concerts or jazz, not jazz, there wasn't really jazz concerts, but jazz performances, and like he was so influenced by them, and I think that's really cool.
And this after his like impressionist stage, or would you say that it's still part of like his impressionist style?
I think it was before, I think, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, pulling a bit of a blank here.
Ravel also did for ballet as well, and he composed for a short like one-act ballet, Daphne et Chloe. I think this is based on a Greek adaptation, like a Greek libretto, but again, it was part of the Ballet Russe, which were just like the hub in Paris at the time. But I was wondering, maybe was he in America before or after this? It was like 1909, 1910, I think, but I don't know, because it'd be interesting to know whether his jazz influence like was there at that time or whether it came after.
He was in America in 1928.
Okay, so after, yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, and I think like talking about jazz and Ravel, I think is another really interesting thing to do with the omphalos. Like we're talking a lot about like, well, like even not omphalos, but like places, we're talking about a lot of them in like Europe. And I also think a big thing that happened in the 20th century was like this move away from Eurocentrism. I don't know what's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
word,
Yeah,
because you see like American culture starting to become a lot more prominent, and like they're standing for their own stuff as opposed to like turning to art in Europe. And like even a lot of like the big European composers like Stravinsky and like Schoenberg and all them, they went and lived in LA. And so like the cultures started to mix, but also like you started to see Americans start to come into their own stride, especially with stuff like jazz. I think like it really, like jazz originated in America and in New Orleans, and like it became so popular, and it just kind of showed that like you were going to say something, Rebecca. It looked like you were going to say
No,
something.
I was interested.
It's just like it kind of showed that like the Americans didn't need to just rely on Europe for their art and their music. Like they could come up with something great on their own. And then if you
I
take
feel
someone,
like
go on.
Sorry, I feel like Aaron Copland was somebody who really established an American style in like late 19th century.
Yeah, I think he helped really develop like the American sound is what I would like when you listen to like a lot of scores or something that like is like about like movies in America or American related, they sound very like Copeland-esque.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I feel like
hear
he
that.
really defined that
Especially think of,
sound.
like the spaghetti westerns and stuff
I was
like
just about
that.
to say Western. It's
Yeah.
very much Western.
Yeah.
Very expansive, like plain. That's
And
what
even
I
like some Morricone scores.
Yeah.
I hear it and yeah.
But do you think jazz is rooted in America, or like is more influenced by like folklore from Africa and stuff? Because I know there's
that's
a
the
very
kind
big-
of thing. It's like it was influenced by like folklore in Africa, like coming over from Africa, because like that's what happened. But like the people who like they considered themselves Americans, and it became its own thing. Like you don't call jazz African folklore, you call it jazz because it's like it was influenced by that, but like it became its own thing, and then like then you've got the likes of like Gershwin, who kind of took the two and was like, hey, jazz and classical, they're class, I'm going to put them together and see what happens. And he got a lot of backlash for that. I think that was another, like there wasn't a lot of embracement of like mixing two
Backlash.
styles together.
Do you think
Backlash from like the classical music community or from the jazz?
Both.
Yeah.
Check out my video on it. They
I will.
but basically like the classical community were like Gershwin's stuff is not classical, it's like a rip-off version of it, and so we don't really condone it. And then the jazz community was like basically like you're not a dark-skinned person, so you're like basically ripping off someone else's style.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well, with like how when you're trying to like create something new and you take it from like something that's already established, that
from a certain culture.
Are you
appreciation or
are you undermining like the qualities of what's already been established, or are you taking only tropes from that?
And see, like I think you can view it in both ways. It's like in a way they kind of are like stealing, but they're stealing ideas, but at the same time it's flattery as well. It's like you consider there to be something there worth stealing.
Yeah, but for example, in like Scheherazade at the beginning of the 19th century, like they were really inspired in Paris. They were really inspired by like Oriental style and like that. Like I don't know, they were kind of creating like erotic, vibrant like art and art presentation and music, but that's what they took from the Orient. Like that's what they imagined it to be, like exotic and mysterious and like colorful, and they portrayed it in that way, in that vein. But I feel like that's kind of like a, I don't know, myopic way of viewing just like or like just one way of looking at Eastern like style, like, you know, Japanese cultures and stuff. I don't know. And then for jazz, I don't have as much knowledge of how like Gershwin took from jazz. Like, I don't know, because he was so innovative. Surely his own stamp like counts for something, you know?
Yeah, well, like the people almost can like the way he took from jazz and classical is like he almost made it, like you kind of alluded, like his own thing. It's like it's not jazz or classical.
No.
It's I suppose that's kind of very like fancy way to say it, but it's neither. It's Gershwin. Like it's like you can't describe Stravinsky, like you can't define Stravinsky style other than Stravinsky, you know, just in the same way you can't describe Gershwin style other than something like that Gershwin would only do.
Yeah.
But I definitely think he like, yeah, he put his own stamp on it.
Yeah, I guess you can relate it back to relativity, like which way you're looking at it. Like if you're looking at it through like a jazz lens, you're gonna think that it's like water jazz, and same with the classical way. But if you look at it like through this like new perspective, then you're going to see what it actually is, which is like a new thing, like
yeah. I guess it depends on how embracing you are of like forward progress.
And I guess that's how all music is made as well, like by just mixing different genres and everything.
Yeah. And is there really like a French style and like an African style?
Yeah.
Maybe it's all.
Yeah.
It's whichever perspective you're looking at it from.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how like we keep coming back to this side, like we keep coming back to the Umphalis idea, but we keep coming back to this idea of like certain parties and cultures like rejecting the past, and then other people like not being able to let go of the past. It's like when you like look at like what Ginte's saying about Dadaism, it's like they just don't care about the past. And then like you've got Stravinsky who's like kind of not letting go of the wants to let go of the can't really. And then you've got like Gershwin who's trying to like mix two things, but then like the like classical community is like, no, you have to obey the rules from the past. I think it's really interesting, like these like different takes on like, should you embrace the past or should you reject it?
Yeah, and then there's different versions of embracing the past as well, because a lot of 20th century composers didn't want to continue with the like same feeling of romanticism, but they wanted to get back to composing still classical music. They didn't want to be so avant-garde. So then neoclassicism came to being, and like it was very much trying to focus on just the music, and like it still had like a really rigid classical form, but it was a 20th century style. It wasn't like based in the past. But I don't know where it would be placed in terms of that. Would it be forward? I don't think it would be forward thinking, because it's quite like it's a classical style.
Regurgitation of
yeah. It was more like a refinement, I feel, of classical form.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else? Anything else spicy?
I don't think I do. Yeah.
Rebecca, do you have anything else you want to talk about with your ballets?
I don't know. What do you want to hear?
Give me something interesting.
Well, I've talked
something that a
about
layman who like me, who isn't well versed in ballet, could find interesting and comprehend.
Well, you're talking a lot about Dadaism and how it relates to surrealism, and I was reading so much about ballet at the beginning of the 20th century that I almost forgot that Stravinsky isn't the only ballet composer. Like there because he did so much, and like
there's others.
Yeah, there are others. Like for example, a really famous ballet Les Sylphides was composed by, well, was used music of Chopin, which is like a 19th century composer, but they used it in 20th century. But that is quite a classical. I feel like it's quite an allusion to like romantic style and romantic art in general. But there's a surrealist ballet, so which which actually surprisingly caused as much controversy as the Rite of Spring, but I don't know why it's not known as. Well, I suppose it came after the Rite of Spring, so therefore people were expecting these scandals to happen. But written by Eric Satie, called Parade, and it's the designs were made by Picasso, and the storyline was really nonsensical. And it was just a surrealist ballet with nonsensical plot, like theme, score, and design. And I've watched so many different versions of it, trying to like follow the storyline, and it's just like it's actually really cool the way it draws you in, I think. But because it's made up of all these like incongruous like elements, and it's where at the time surrealism wasn't an ism, but they said that this poet, I think, I'm not sure if it's correct, if that he's a poet, Guillaume Apollinaire, he watched this ballet and he became inspired by this like heightened perception of reality and like nonsensical reality, that he coined the term surrealism, like literally super realism, in his notes watching the ballet before it became an ism in Paris. So that's
Wow.
Sounds like a mix of everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
Sounds really cool. It's so weird how like even though there's like so many different stuff, they're all just connected. Like it's so weird to me.
Yeah.
It really is.
After this lengthy conversation, does anybody have any different views of what an omphalos is, or is everybody sticking by their guard?
I feel like I agree with you all. I'm very flexible interpretation of it.
Fair.
Yeah.
Not very argumentative today.
No.
We're more existential.
Yeah.
Incredible.
We're all gonna leave this being like, why are we here? What's happening?
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been the digression session with the omphalos.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Nick.
See you next
Goodbye.
week.
Okay.
I digress.